They say that in the attic of this synagogue there is a body. It's not human. It was never alive, not exactly. It was built from river clay by a rabbi who knew the secret name of God. And for a few months in the 1580s, it walked the streets of Prague. That's the legend of the Golem. But here's what they don't tell you. The rabbi who supposedly created it was a real man. He lived in this city. He walked these same streets. And in 1592, he was summoned to Prague Castle by the Holy Roman Emperor himself, not to discuss politics or taxes, but to talk about magic. In a few months, Dan Brown's new novel, Secret of Secrets, will introduce millions of readers to this legend. Netflix will film the adaptation in Prague. But the Hollywood version is fiction, and the real story is stranger than anything even Dan Brown could invent. So what actually happened? Did Rabbi Loew really create a monster, or is the truth something stranger? Let's start with the story as most people know it. Prague, late 16th century. The Jewish quarter is under siege. Blood libel accusations are spreading. The lie that Jews murder Christian children and use their blood in rituals. Mobs are forming. The community is terrified. Rabbi Judah Loew ben Bezalel, known as the Maharal, decides he needs a protector. Something that doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, doesn't feel pain. Late one night, he walks to the banks of the Vltava River with two of his closest disciples. They gather wet clay from the riverbed. The rabbi molds it into the shape of a man. Arms, legs, a head, massive hands. The legend says that Rabbi Loew, with his disciples, circled the clay body 7 times and recited a combination of letters of the Hebrew alphabet in specific sequences. The clay began to glow. It hardened. And when the rabbi placed a shem, a clay tablet inscribed with the ineffable name of God, into the creature's mouth, its eyes opened. The golem was alive. It couldn't speak. Only a man with a soul can speak. But it could understand commands. It could fight. And for a time, it protected the Jewish quarter, exposing false accusers and driving away attackers. But the golem had no will of its own. It couldn't distinguish between orders and consequences. One Friday evening, Rabbi Loew forgot to remove the shem before the Sabbath began. The golem, confused and uncontrolled, began rampaging through the ghetto, smashing buildings, uprooting trees, terrorizing the very people it was built to protect. The rabbi confronted the creature. He reached into its mouth. He pulled out the shem. The golem collapsed. Its body crumbled back into clay. And according to legend, Rabbi Loew carried the remains up to the attic of the old, new synagogue, where they remain to this day. That's the story. It's been retold in novels, films, comic books, and even in video games. The Netflix adaptation of Dan Brown's Secret of Secrets will soon bring the golem to its biggest audience yet, filmed right here in Prague. But here's the problem. Almost none of the golem's story can be really traced to the 16th century. The Golem of Prague is a 19th century invention. And the rabbi at the center of it, the real Judah Loew ben Bezalel, was even more fascinating than the legend. The real Judah Loew ben Bezalel was born around 1524, probably in Poznan, Poland. He came from a family of distinguished rabbis, and from a young age, Loew was recognized as brilliant, a prodigy in Talmud, mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. He became the chief rabbi of Moravia at roughly 29 years old, then moved to Prague to serve as the spiritual leader of one of the largest Jewish communities in Europe. This is where things get interesting, because the Prague Loew arrived in was unlike anywhere else in Europe. The emperor at the time was Rudolf II, and Rudolf was, unusual. He moved his entire court from Vienna to Prague in 1583, transforming the city into the intellectual and artistic center of the continent. He was obsessed with alchemy, Kabbalah, astrology, and the occult. His court at Prague Castle was filled with alchemists trying to transmute lead into gold, astronomers mapping the heavens, and mystics claiming they could speak to angels. And in this environment, Rabbi Loew became a figure of intense curiosity to the emperor himself. In February 1592, Rudolf II summoned Rabbi Loew to Prague Castle. This was unprecedented. A Jewish rabbi summoned by the Holy Roman Emperor for a private audience. What did they discuss? No official record survives, but contemporary sources reported that the conversation lasted several hours and covered Kabbalah, the mystical interpretation of Scripture, and the nature of divine creation. Some accounts claim Rudolf asked Loew to perform a magical demonstration. Others say the rabbi conjured the spirits of dead patriarchs. We can't verify any of that. But here's what we do know. Rabbi Loew left the castle unharmed. He was never persecuted. And less than a year later, Rudolf issued new protections for Prague's Jewish community. That's not a legend, that's documented history. So if the Golem of Prague legend isn't from the 16th century, where did it come from? The answer comes in 3 layers. The word golem appears exactly once in the entire Hebrew Bible. Psalm 139, verse 16. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. Golmi in Hebrew. It means something raw, unfinished, embryonic. The idea of an artificial being formed from earth was there from the beginning, buried in the language itself. In the Talmud, there are scattered references to rabbis creating artificial beings. The most famous appears in Tractate Sanhedrin, where Rava, a 4th century Babylonian sage, is said to have created a man from dust and sent him to another rabbi. That rabbi spoke to the creature, realized it couldn't respond, and said, "You were created by magic. Return to your dust." The Golem of Prague, as we know it, first appeared in writing in the 1830s and 1840s, nearly 250 years after Rabbi Loew's death. It was spread by Jewish folklorists, then picked up by German-language writers, then exploded into popular culture through Gustav Meyrink's 1915 novel Der Golem and the 1920s silent film of the same name. So the legend we know today is a composite, built layer by layer over centuries, each generation adding its own fears and hopes. Let's separate fact from fiction. The blood libel threat. True. In the late 16th century, Prague's Jewish community faced real, violent persecution. Blood libel accusations were circulating. Mobs did form. The fear in the legend was not invented. It was a documented reality of daily life. Rabbi Loew as protector. True. Loew was a towering figure in Jewish communal life, not just a scholar, but a leader who advocated for his community before emperors and nobles. The legend's framing of him as a defender is historically accurate. The attic of the old new synagogue. True. The synagogue is real. It's the oldest active synagogue in Europe, completed around 1270. Its attic has been sealed for centuries. And here is where the legend takes its strangest turn into documented fact. In the spring of 1942, the Nazi officer Reinhard Heydrich dispatched an SS unit to the Jewish quarter with a specific mission. They were ordered to open the attic of the synagogue and search it. The officer who led the operation climbed the narrow staircase himself. He ordered his men to pry open the sealed door. Inside, by flashlight, they searched every corner of the attic, and they found nothing. Old prayer books, Torah scroll fragments, abandoned furniture, but no golem, no clay body, No artifact of any kind that matched the legend. The officer descended the stairs, dismissed his men, and filed a report that likely read as routine. But the question lingers: why did the Third Reich, in the middle of a world war, send soldiers to search an attic of a synagogue for a monster from Jewish folklore? The answer, perhaps, is the most unsettling part of all. The Nazis were obsessed with Jewish mysticism. The SS had entire departments dedicated to occult research. They believed that ancient Jewish texts contained hidden power. And if there was even a chance that a 16th century rabbi had discovered the secret of creation itself, they wanted it. But if the Golem of Prague is a fiction, why does the story persist? Why do tour guides still point at that sealed attic and lower their voices? Because the Golem legend isn't really about a clay monster, it's about powerlessness. In the 16th century, the Jewish community of Prague couldn't defend itself. They had no army. They had no political power. The law itself was often weaponized against them. The golem is a fantasy of protection. What if we could build something that would keep us safe? What if the most learned man in our community could use the deepest mysteries of creation to defend us? The golem isn't in that attic. It never was. But the hope that something could protect us, that an answer exists, hidden, waiting, that has been in Prague for 500 years. So here is the verdict. The golem itself? Fiction. There is no record from Loew's lifetime. Not in his writings, not in his students' chronicles, not anywhere in the 16th century. A legend stitched together in the 1800s by a community's desperate hunger for protection, fused into one story. The real Golem of Prague was never made of clay. It was made of stories. A myth so powerful that an emperor discussed it, an SS officer hunted for it, and 500 years later, we are still telling it. The golem worked, not as a monster, as protection, not with fists, but with meaning. The truth is not less interesting than the legend. It's just been waiting for someone to tell it. I'm the Prague Historian. If you want to uncover more of the real history behind the myths, subscribe. In the next episode, we go to Prague's Old Town Square. An astronomical clock has been ticking there for over 600 years. They say the man who built it was blinded, so he could never create anything like this clock again. Is that true? We'll find out.